Okay, everyone, welcome to the first module in the Improvides Innovation webinar series. This is the first of 8 modules every Wednesday for the next 8 weeks, and it aims to give you very good insight into how you can incorporate best practice innovation processes into your own organization. So this is going to be a 60-minute presentation followed by half an hour in which we can discuss the sort of things that you learned from the session itself, and using the chat window, everyone's able to ask questions about anything they're seeing at any time. And during that last half an hour, we'll then go through all those questions. So if you have any questions about how what you've seen might apply to your organization or some of the challenges you're facing, then I'll endeavor to give you an insight then. So, first of all, let's go through the importance of innovation itself. 2010, a CEO survey done by IBM asked all the CEOs what's going to be the most important capability within your organization for future success. And every single CEO put innovation in their top 3 answers. Across the board, it was by far and away the most important capability for their organizations to have. And the reason for that is innovation is important because it's fundamentally the only way for your company and business to grow organically. And that's by developing new offerings. If you just keep doing the same thing you're doing, eventually someone else is going to find a way of doing either something that addresses the customer needs better, or they're going to take what you're doing and just do it better. You need to keep developing new offerings. Innovation is also key to providing what your customers will actually find valuable. One thing you'll hopefully get from today is the difference between just coming up with new solutions and actually figuring out what solutions are best able to address your customers' real challenges. It's also about diversifying your current offerings and business models, which helps reduce long-term risk. There's not just one way of doing innovation. There's many different ways that you can do innovation. And again, this will give you an insight into the different things you can do and how it'll help reduce long-term risk within your business. And finally, when people are working with an innovative organization, they're feeling more engaged and likely to push themselves further because they see their inputs actually translating into changes within the organization. So, what this webinar series aims to give you. As we discussed, it's all about how you can incorporate best practice innovation within your own teams. And what sort of things does that include? Well, it's about getting more value from individuals across the entire organization. Some companies make the mistake of having innovation just be part of the domain of either marketing or research and development. But what you'll find is if you actually incorporate the values of it throughout the corporate environment, you'll get a lot more benefit than if it was just a couple of people. You'll get a larger number of more diverse ideas and valuable ideas. So not just more, but more appropriate ones. It'll help target your innovation efforts and your resources at customer requirements. So as I just mentioned, not just developing new things, but developing ones that your customers actually want. The webinar series will also help you see working best practices to improve your innovation delivery. So not just coming up with the new ideas, but actually turning them into something tangible, helping you get more success out of your innovation efforts. It's also going to give you an insight onto how you manage and measure success. This is something that many companies struggle with. Innovation and ideas seem to be such a flexible, intangible concept that how can you possibly measure how well you're actually doing? Well, this will give you an insight. And then finally, it'll help you broaden your business models, or at least think about strategically what things could you be doing to add value to what you're currently doing. So everything you hear, all of the expert insights, also have exclusive methodologies developed by Improvides, and we'll give you those as part of this series. All of the best practice examples from across industries will give you insight into what other companies are doing, which you might be able to do yourself. You'll also get all of the ready-to-use templates for download right after the webinar. So when you see something that you think, oh, I might want to do that with my team, you'll be able to download it right after we talk about it and get it used within your organization that same day. You'll find out all of the research and statistics which underlie our recommendations. Unlike several other courses, everything we advise here is because it's been backed up by research. And finally, it includes actions you can implement immediately. So not just templates, but other small changes you can make to actually go and start getting value as soon as possible. So let's talk a bit about me, about Improvides, to let you know where I'm coming from and how I can help you guys. So my name's Nick Skillicorn. I'm from London. I'm the CEO and founder of Improvides, and I launched the firm in June 2013. I've wanted to help people improve their ability to generate ideas, but also, more importantly, to actually get value out of those ideas. So not just become more creative, but actually get value out of those ideas. Before I worked here, I was working at a Big Four consulting firm for 7 years. It's quite a long time, and I was focused on program management and had program management experience in projects worth over 10 billion US dollars. In addition to that management consulting side, I've also got very much a very different creative side. I spent 4 years training people in improvisation and essentially how to be more spontaneous and generate ideas on the fly. And incorporating all of these things, over the next few months, I'm going to be writing a book on the subject of creativity and innovation to help you and everyone else get the methodology into your company of how to actually get the value out of it. Personally, I'm also just a curious person. I'm very sociable. I'm an avid traveler. And I think these things really help broaden the scope of what I'm talking about. It's not just from a consulting background. It's from things I've seen at a variety of different places, different things I've seen proved in recent research, things seen from different cultures around the world. So hopefully it gives a sort of nice broad insight into everything that you could do. Now, while people in the innovation sphere often talk about specific things that you can do for small teams for what they call a big gain, I prefer to think about the aggregation of marginal gains. What you see here is a picture of the British Olympic cycling team, Team GB, and one of my previous projects was I was working with the British athletes for the London Olympics. It's the best project I've ever done. Likely to be the best consulting project that anyone's had the chance of being involved in. But I learned from the head of GB Cycling, whose name is Dave Brailsford, and he was tasked with the task of developing a Tour de France winning British rider within 5 years prior to the last Olympics. It's something that had never happened and something that many people considered impossible. So he went about thinking, how do you actually get the best improvement from both individuals and the teams that support them? And he came up with this theory of the aggregation of marginal gains. It's about finding small gains across all of your teams and processes, which lead to an overall very big improvement. So for cyclists, he didn't just focus on nutrition and training leg strength and coordination. He thought, what is every single aspect that goes into the production of a rider? And from that he found not only about safety and about lightweight materials and bicycles. It included tiny things like dyeing the rider's hands when they went to the bathroom to wash their hands to see whether or not they were actually doing it properly. He found hygiene was a hugely important thing. He also set out his team to include the same pillow that every rider has at home should be the one that they take to competitions, because that increases the chance that they're going to get exactly the same amount of sleep, which is good for the rider's system. So looking at all of these tiny things that you can do across the space leads to an overall very much improved program. So instead of developing a Tour de France winning rider in 5 years, they ended up producing Sir Bradley Wiggins, winning it in 2.5 years. And during the Olympics themselves, they won a huge number of gold medals, more than any other country, and it was a huge success. So it's about the different areas that can be improved, which might not be obvious to everyone in the organization, but if everyone puts their mind to it, they can each find ones that can be improved. Overall, innovation, in my view, is very much like this. It's more than the sum of its parts. And from this, improvisers developed the theory of the 3 dimensions of innovation. How do you actually get benefit of innovation across the entire organization? How do you get all of these little small things working together to get you benefits? And we've come up with the 3 dimensions of innovation. The first one starts with T. It's teamwork, techniques, and tools. How do groups of people come up with ideas and then take those ideas and turn them into something that's actually valuable? The next one is organizational support. This is everything that an organization does, a company does, to support innovation practices within its corporate culture. And then the final one, which usually gets ignored by people because it's very difficult to describe and actually measure, is people's creativity. individual people's ability to come up with ideas in the first place. Now I'm going to go through each of these individually. First of all, teamwork techniques and tools. As I said, this is about getting the right team working on projects to make it most likely to take an idea and actually turn it into something which the customer is going to find valuable. And within this dimension, Improvides has found that there are the following capabilities within organizations that really emphasize this being a good skill. Firstly, the focus on the problem and the solution. This means that all of the effort goes not only onto making things as enhanced as possible, as functional as possible. It's all about focusing on the problem and providing a solution to that problem. The next is about location and work environment. This is about what does your physical space look like? What do desks look like? What facilities are available to your teams to work in? Because those have a big difference in how different people within the teams are able to work together. Next is evaluation. How do you evaluate ideas? Because once you have a whole list of ideas, you need to figure out which ones to actually focus your effort on. What's the methodology used to manage your innovation projects? One of which we'll come on to later. How do you deal with experimentation and prototyping? So actually taking ideas and figuring out how good they actually are. How do you ensure there's diversity within your team? And what resources do they need to actually come up with these solutions to challenges? Within your teams and companies, what time available is there for people to not only work on these innovation projects, but also be able to contribute other ideas and other innovations on their own time? How do you cross-pollinate people between ideas to ensure that certain solutions which are applicable in one area of the business might be applicable in other areas? What tools do you give them, technologically and otherwise? How do you take groups and brainstorm effectively? It's something I'm going to go on to later, because usually it's done wrong, and there's research to show how it really should be done. And finally, once you've got a lot of ideas and a team working on them, how do they feed back on those ideas and refine them into something that's actually valuable? By the way, if at any point I'm going a bit too quickly, then just type a little note in the chat box and I'll try to slow down a bit. So, the next of the three dimensions is organizational support. This is focused mainly on leadership level within a company and what they do to encourage innovation and actually support it within the organization. First of all, the vision and the strategy of the organization. One thing we're going to be coming on to later on in this webinar, which is about how to prepare for innovation. Training and new experiences. Usually, many companies focus on training as something that starts and ends when a new person joins the company. But it's something that can have a long-lasting effect if people are trained throughout their time there. What are the different types of innovation that you can do? Contrary to popular belief, there's actually 10 different types of innovation, which I'll get onto later, which can have a huge impact if done together, or at least different types of innovation done together. How do you reward ideas, and how do you handle risk aversion within leadership? And how do you measure and reward performance by individual people? How does sponsorship and accountability, not only for ideas, but for projects, for investment, for everything go within the organization? How do you handle company-wide idea generation to encourage everyone to be able to contribute ideas on how the company could benefit? How do you allocate budget? What sort of levels of bureaucracy are appropriate? How do you support innovation in as many different ways as possible throughout the company? And finally, how do you focus on the market and the customers? Then the third of the three dimensions, the one that most experts usually like to ignore, is people's creativity. This is how people are actually able to come up with ideas. And the more you talk to them about it, the better they are to be able to think of ideas in the most appropriate way. So how do you manage distractions, interruptions, and flow? What sort of work processes help to keep people on track for developing their ideas? And what does persistence and dedication matter in the process? How does variety and new experiences change the degree to which you're able to come up with new solutions? Knowing your brain. This is something that I focused on quite a lot in research in neuroscience. Something I'll give you an example of later, but the more you understand about how your brain actually comes up with ideas, the better you'll be able to put yourself in different mindsets depending on what sort of ideas you need to come up to. Hi there, Sean.
Hi there, Sean. Hello.
I've noticed that you're speaking on the moment. Is there any chance you could go on mute?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
What does the content and knowledge of someone's... Sean, I'm getting a bit of feedback from you.
Sorry.
No problem. I'll continue anyway. What does content and knowledge of what an expert in your organization previously has, how does that affect their ability to generate ideas and what sort of ideas they're likely to come up with? How do you take several people and take a process of yes and collaboration to improve people's ideas across the board? This is based on my background on improvisation, and it's one of the most powerful tools you can have on having groups of people come up with ideas together. How do you improve the speed at which people are able to come up with ideas? Some people might be able to think of 1 or 2 ideas in a minute, whereas other people can think of 20. What does framing the challenge and putting limitations on people's creativity do to affect the type of ideas that they come up with? How are some people more original in the ideas they come up with and the breadth that they can think of ideas over? And when someone is struggling to come up with ideas, what can you do to help them break through those barriers? And then finally, what does confidence have to do with their ability to come up with ideas? So, the reason why I talk about these dimensions and all of these individual capabilities and the aggregation of marginal gains is that it's been statistically proven by one of the departments in the consultancy that I used to work at, that the variety of innovations that a company undertakes has a direct impact on how well they grow financially as a company. So of the different types of innovations that they can do, between 0 and 10, which I'll come on to a bit later, the more varied a company's innovation effort is, the more they'll perform financially. The graph that you see in front of you right now shows the stock market performance of several hundred companies averaged out, done with the research of the consultancy I mentioned, compared to the Standard & Poor's 500 index. As you can see, the overall index is the red line at the bottom. And between 1 and 2 types of innovation that people did at a company, it showed a strong gain compared to that, as far as average stock price compared to that time period. But those companies which did between 3 and 4 or 5 and more different types of innovation outperformed those companies even more. So the more innovative your company is has a direct impact on how successful it is financially. So let's go on to a couple of the myths of innovation, things that people might consider to be true, but hopefully, hopefully, as you start to go through the webinar series, you'll see that there's things that you can improve directly to counteract those myths. So the first myth is that innovation cannot be managed. When many people think of innovation, they think of young, flexible, energetic teams like those that you see in startup sectors along the right in the picture here, with a nice team of young tech entrepreneurs playing table tennis. They think that a company such as the one on the left, a large bureaucratic boardroom, is likely to be very much less innovative than the other. The standard perception is that large companies are highly bureaucratic, they're slow to react, they're very risk averse, and they're very inflexible in what they do. Whereas many people believe that young companies, startup entrepreneur companies, are very flexible, they're quick to react and also to change. They're not afraid of failure. In fact, some of them even embrace failure, and that they have fewer hierarchies within the company, which therefore allows them to be more innovative. But the question is, which of these two is actually more innovative? Well, in reality, any company of any size that has a structured innovation management program will improve the likelihood of successful innovations. Large and small, you don't just become successful by being flexible, by being quick to react. The thing that makes you successful is being able to provide what your customers want. So how can you help that as far as a sort of management program solution goes? Well, a standard program management lifecycle, like you'd see in a large organization, often looks a bit like this, a sort of multi-stage, sequential step process, starting with the initiation of a project, lots of planning, a design of a solution, the building and testing of that solution, the execution of it, and then the closing of it, interspersed by large stage gates where people decide, has all the documentation been done? Can management allow this project to go forward or not? Now, for large organizations undertaking very large projects, this is often the most appropriate way to do it. But it's usually appropriate for projects based on established technology or processes, such as the implementation of large enterprise IT systems, or high-risk projects requiring multiple levels of documentation and approval to proceed. An example of this would be the merging of different departments following a takeover. But this sequential program management lifecycle really isn't appropriate for certain situations, such as the development of new solutions, solutions that require experimentation without a clear end product, investments which are intended to pay off in the long term, or solutions which have to evolve over time and incorporate outsider feedback. So this is the background that I came from in management consulting. And I asked myself, look, what's actually appropriate for an innovative company, for an innovative program that needs to come up with new solutions? This program management lifecycle just isn't. So based on what the best practice tells us, what would be an innovation lifecycle? And we've come up with this. This is what we call the Improvides Innovation lifecycle. It's a tool that's meant to help teams and management in managing their innovation projects, to help them not only get the right team doing the right work, but also to speed up the delivery of innovative solutions. So this version goes like this. Before you do anything, you need to investigate. When you've got a challenge, you need to find out what the requirements for that actually are. And instead of diving head into designing a solution, you need to find out what the problem is. Many startups I see make the mistake of developing a solution and then trying to find a problem for it. What you actually need to do is find a problem that a customer has and then develop a solution for that. Only then can you actually deliver something that's valuable to the consumer. So after you've gone out and you've investigated what the problems are, then you can come back together and ideate, which means come up with lots of ideas, and evaluate those ideas to find the most appropriate ones. Once you've selected the most appropriate ones, only then do you start designing a solution, building it, and experimenting it. In an innovation lifecycle approach, you'd want this to be as quick and as flexible as possible, whereby there's a continuous loop of taking data from your experiments, finding out the reasons for those results, refining them, and then redesigning and re-experimenting. This helps you much more quickly come to a solution which actually addresses your customers' challenges. From that process, you're also likely to develop new ideas, which can then be evaluated again and brought back into the design. So once you've got a design, which we'd often call a minimum viable product, something that you think addresses these specific challenges, you then go into a test launch. So this might be a launch in a specific subsect of the company, a specific region, whether or not it's online or not, whether or not it only focuses at certain customers, but it needs to be a quick and dirty test. But the important thing here is to figure out whether or not it's actually addressing your customers' desires. So for this test, again, we'd suggest that you go and get your customers and suppliers and anyone else who's going to have an interest in this solution, get a subset of those that you really trust and get them to give you feedback on it, even though it's an imperfect version of what the final solution is going to be. And only then, once you've gone back and incorporated their feedback into the design, made the changes, and found that your test launch has been ultimately successful, do you go into a full launch. Now, again, after a full launch, there's two things that can happen. Either some people continue working on the program. So, for example, if there's a new product that comes out of the program and you want to update it every year, like a new mobile phone or a new software application, then they can stay on the team and continue this iterative feedback process to develop new features. Or, because your resources for innovation are limited, both people and investment, some resources should be reallocated to other programs. So in a bit more detail, We won't go through this today. This is something for the next module. What does the Improvides Innovation Lifecycle actually say you should do? As I described, this is a bit more detail. You can pause it in the video afterwards when you stream it. But it takes you through the step-by-step action plan for what your teams should do in order to successfully execute on an innovation program. The modules of this webinar series are also set out to help train you in doing this activity, and therefore within the few weeks of the webinar series happening, you'll be able to get the benefit of this process immediately. So myth number 2, customers will see the value of your products at launch. This goes back to what I was talking about in many startups thinking, we've got this amazing solution, customers are going to love it. So this isn't necessarily the case. I want to give you 2 quite famous examples. First one comes from the mobile phone sector. Late 1998, early 1999, there's a company who came out onto the market with the most advanced mobile phone in existence. They were called Iridium, and this was a satellite telephone. It could work anywhere in the world because they'd launched dozens of satellites into space that could be communicated with via this amazing mobile phone. It was going to revolutionize travel. It was going to revolutionize corporate work across the globe. It was going to revolutionize everything. In the same year, Nokia came out with the Nokia 3210. One of the biggest innovations this came up with was the fact that you could play a little game called Snake on it. But it was extremely cheap. It lasted for ages, and it was basically indestructible. I used to have one, and you could throw it around the room and it would still work fine. Now, Iridium invested billions of dollars into their capital. And within 9 months, they were bankrupt. They had released a product that was essentially not solving a solution for a large enough market to justify that outlay. So they didn't realize that their customers just weren't willing to pay for that service. Whereas Nokia had a very good idea of what was important to their customers and therefore developed a solution for that. A cheap mobile phone for the masses that was very easy to use and ended up becoming one of the most popular mobile phones in the world, selling more than 160 million units. There's another famous example, which comes from the automobile industry. Now, these are 2 cars. One of them is very famous, and one of them is not very famous. The one on the left is the Ford Model S. Henry Ford had designed cars before the Model T, but he just hadn't figured out how to get them into a state where they were addressing the customer's problems. And then Ford famously pioneered the movement to the assembly line. He didn't invent the assembly line, he didn't invent the car, but he brought the 2 of them together, and from those 2 he developed the Model T Ford, the first mass market affordable automobile. Famously, one of my favorite quotes on innovation comes from Henry Ford, and it's about how you need to essentially see what is valuable to your customers. And he famously said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster horse. Whereas he realized what they actually want is something that outperforms what they currently see as the best in class, which at that point was still a horse, in every way. So the reality is, customers will buy into innovations if they see the value, and if it effectively and accessibly solves a customer's challenge. That means it doesn't necessarily need to be the most advanced solution out there. Sometimes it just needs to be the most accessible and the most value-adding and sometimes the cheapest solution out there. Myth number 3. Only some people are creative. Oh, this one riles me a bit because there's a lot of people talking about sort of brain neuroscience, saying there's a difference between left brain people and right brain people. Left brain people being the very analytic, focused people. Whereas right brain people are these crazy artists who are the ones who have all of the good ideas. Now, many people will be honest and say that they don't consider themselves very creative. And this goes back to a history of us being educated in the sense of there are right answers and there are wrong answers. And if you give the wrong answer, then you're incorrect, and that's a failure in the education system. Similarly, many workplaces also subscribe to that idea that you have your work to do, and if you do it differently, then it's incorrect. There's a very interesting statistic that I've come across, which is the change in views of creativity between second graders and high schoolers. If you ask second grade students whether or not they're creative, 90% of them will say, yes, I am creative. By the fifth grade, that proportion will have dropped down to only half of them saying that they're creative. And by high school, 90 to 95% of them will say that they are not creative anymore. That's a huge drop within a few short years of people changing their perceptions of themselves as to whether or not they're creative. Now, there's an interesting study as well, which went into analyzing what is the actual trait of creativity in a sort of genetic sense. This is a study of 177 pairs of twins, both identical and fraternal, between the ages of 15 and 22. And they were all given a slew of creativity tests and an IQ test. Now, what that found was that there's an 80% proportion of an 80% probability that your IQ is specifically determined by your genetics. So general intelligence as measured by the IQ test is largely genetic. But only 30% of your creativity is related to genetics. In fact, 70% of the difference between the twins in the creativity test suggested that nurture passes nature in determining whether or not you're creative. That means that everyone starts out being creative, and often people are just moved into a non-creative mindset. I'd also like to just mention the difference between left brain and right brain people, because there isn't really one. Yes, there are some people who are more predisposed to creativity than not, but even those people use all of their brain when it comes to developing new ideas. You need to use the entire context of your brain to come up with ideas. In reality, everyone has creativity and they use both sides of their brain. And importantly as well, with training, everyone can improve the ability to generate ideas. And I just want to give you an insight into how that actually works. Essentially, there are two ways that people generate ideas. Now, I've got a view of the brain here showing the left and right hemispheres. But what I actually want to show you is the types of the parts of the brain linked with the two distinct types of idea generation. First of all, you've got convergent thinking. This is determined by a part of your brain just behind your eyes on your forehead, called your prefrontal cortex. It's also known as working memory. And these types of mental activities are about consciously developing and refining ideas, evaluating and building on ideas, and requiring focus. These are the sort of ideas that you might get if you are tasked with writing a story or a poem, or taking an incomplete mathematical theorem and improving upon it. It's the sort of thing that you do when you're focused, sitting down, and looking at a challenge and sort of figuring out the solutions to that challenge. This is ideas from all across your brain converging in your working memory and being combined, tested, and therefore solutions being developed from that. On the opposite end of the spectrum is divergent thinking. This is what people usually consider to be the aha moments, where you just get an insight, an idea that seems to come out of nowhere. And this is based on your anterior temporal superior gyrus, which is on your right side of your brain, just above your right ear. It comes after subconscious incubation work has been happening in your brain, and it's based on previous knowledge and content and questions. So what I mean by this is when you've set yourself a challenge to come up with ideas, and it's just not coming, even if you've been thinking about it, when you then go away from the challenge and do other things, that then frees up your mental capacity, the parts of your brain that work unconsciously on it, that work across the neurons in your brain, to then become active. And eventually, quite often after sleep, they'll finally decide that, okay, I've come up with a solution, and then bring it to the forefront of your brain. And that part of the brain gets activated, and you get this sort of revelation of an idea that seems to have come out of nowhere. Now, the important thing to remember here is that convergent thinking requires focus, whereas divergent thinking requires a relaxed mental state. So In Module 3, where we talk about developing creativity and getting through creative barriers, I'll talk much more about the neuroscience of the brain and about how you can use that to put yourself in different mental states depending on what sort of ideas you need to come up with. Myth number 4. If you want to come up with innovative solutions, you should just fill your team full of as many most creative people as possible. It's a common assumption. If you want to get lots of ideas, you should fill your team with lots of creative people. But what's actually the case is that innovation is very much a team sport. It requires not only people to generate ideas, but it helps that different people can complement each other's skills, and also different people can counteract each other's weaknesses. This is why it's so important to have a very diverse mix of people in all parts of your innovation programs. So in addition to having someone who's extremely good at coming up with ideas, a very creative person, as you may say, it's just as important to have someone who's very good at finding the reasons behind how a solution might work for a customer, developing a solution from just an idea into a refined experiment that can be done, and testing whether or not it's actually the case, whether or not that idea is right. And also, you need other people who are very good executors, people who can work within the rules of the company to make things happen, people who can take an idea and take it to market. So different people with different skill sets really work together to create the most important innovations. Real innovations require a diverse group of people with complementary skill sets who can together generate ideas, refine them into solutions, and then execute on them. This is something we go into in Module 4, where we talk about setting up a very high-performance team. And then myth number 5, quantity of ideas drives innovation. This goes back to Alex Osborne, who founded the idea of brainstorming. For him, one of the main credos of brainstorming was get as many ideas up there as possible, and we'll find good ones in there somewhere. But what's been shown scientifically, again, is that it's not just the quantity of ideas that drives innovation, it's what you do with those ideas. So while you'll quite often come up with ideas in a brainstorming session, most brainstorming sessions are extremely bad at actually getting value out of those ideas at the end. You've got a picture here of a door just covered in post-it notes. But this is a very good example of people feeling that they've been productive because they've written something down. What's more important is to take ideas, figure out which ones are valuable using an evaluation process, and then taking those and turning them into actionable items so that you actually do something with them afterwards. So in Module 5, I talk about how you generate ideas both individually and as a team, what the most effective way of doing brainstorming is, which requires a very different setup to what most people consider brainstorming, and then what you do with those ideas afterwards. So in reality, teams and individuals need to evaluate ideas and turn them into actions to become solutions, then take experiments and refine ideas, which will make the final offering much more likely to be successful. So it's good to talk about all of these sort of tips of what you can do in innovation, but this module is called Preparing for Innovation. And one of the most important things I want you guys to get out of this is to think about the actual duties of innovation within companies. One of the most important ones is who should lead innovation. If you ask many people, most large companies have got what they call a Chief Innovation Officer. This is a person who's been tasked with essentially spearheading and taking a leadership position on getting innovative solutions out there. But what's actually been proven is that the most successful innovative companies have one person who really embodies what innovation is for them and how to do it successfully. And this is the CEO. In nearly every innovative organization, you're going to find the person at the helm really embodying what it means to be innovative. Steve Jobs, like Henry Ford, was a visionary who figured out what his customers actually wanted implicitly rather than explicitly. So he knew what they would find valuable, and he was willing to invest heavily in developing those solutions. Richard Branson is another very visionary leader who sets his team challenges to come up with the most innovative solutions as possible. One quote he has is he likes to set totally unrealistic expectations for his teams. You've got to set them ridiculously high, essentially when it comes to deadlines. So, for example, if you say you want something in 12 weeks, they might pull it off in 20. Or if you aim for 30 weeks, it might take a year. But it's about setting these mountain innovation challenges for your team, because if you don't aim high, then you're going to end up low. The third one here you might not recognize. His name is Inge Thulin. He's the CEO of 3M, one of the most innovative organizations in the world. And he really embodies what leadership should be at an innovative organization as well, because he constantly encourages his team to come up with new ideas, to come up with new solutions, and to help them incorporate them into the company. And then finally, not every leader needs to be a corporate leader. One of the most innovative men that I know of is John F. Kennedy. He said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we're unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win." The most important people in an organization to lead innovation are the CEO. This has been seen in many different ways, but one of the clearest ways is companies that have innovation challenges within their organization have a hugely much higher turnout for people submitting ideas if the CEO directly endorses them by doing something like a video telling their staff to do it, or to send out letters and emails to their staff, or best of all, to turn up in person to publicly show their endorsement of their innovation programs. And why is this? It's because companies are led from the top, and the vision and strategy of a company is what will determine their innovation strategy. Different companies require different strategies. So a company is going to have a vision, which is what you want your future company or your role in the world to look like. A strategy, which is what changes the business needs to do to achieve them, and goals and actions, which is what activities and innovations each contribute towards achieving that strategy. The successful innovators are aware and honest about their strengths and areas for improvement, and when there is an area for improvement, they actively invest in them. They have a deep insight into how competitors and new technologies are going to affect the market in the future. So they've got their view on what the trends are, and they've got reasons behind those. And they realize that they need to deliver differentiated solutions, some of which may not immediately recoup investments, or some of them might not recoup investments at all. But it's a risk that you have to take. You have to have the courage to do that. So, what can you get out of today's discussion about preparing for innovation? Well, I'd suggest you guys to all go and essentially figure out what best practice innovation is for your company, and therefore to take an honest assessment of how good you currently are. Sort of things I'd suggest you look at are: list out all of your current projects, see what you're working on and whether or not that aligns to your company vision, strategy, and goals. You've got a limited number of resources to actually allocate to innovation, and if you don't allocate those resources appropriately, you're more than likely going to fail in those projects. Also look at what leadership message is being put out there. Is your CEO, are your regional leaders, are they all saying this is important, in the sense that we want individuals to take ownership of generating new ideas, and we're going to recognize people for doing that? How are they recognized? What sort of message is out there as far as risk aversion compared to desire for new ideas? Look at your current HR policies around recruitment. Do you recruit people just because of their skill set and qualifications, or do you also recruit people because you think they can bring new perspectives and new ideas and might be very different to members of your current team? What's the policy around work time allocation? Are people being given time to work on projects outside of their normal project scope if they think that they can develop an idea that might bring value to the company? And what training are they given outside of what they got originally? Are they given diversified training that might help them think of more ideas in the future? And then finally, look at your current financial performance. how is your budget allocated to innovation activities? So which projects are incremental in their innovations, which are extensions to current projects, and which are the sort of more radical long-term breakthrough projects? And then finally, from your actual current revenue portfolio, how much do innovation projects contribute to that? One way of thinking about that is, of the projects launched in the last 3 years, of the products launched into the market over the last 3 years, of the new solutions that are out there or the new business models, what dollar value are they bringing to your company as part of your total percentage of revenue? These are all things that will give you an insight into best practice. The graphic we've got there is one of the consulting services that we do at Improvides, which is we take companies through an innovation health check. So we actually compare them to what is best practice in the market for all of the 3 dimensions of innovation capabilities. Afterwards, you'll be able to see, this is where we're strong, this is where we might need to invest a bit or put a project in place to improve it. So what is the overall Improvides Innovation webinar series? As I discussed, today is about preparing for innovation, thinking about it in a strategic level, and it's the free session that you see here. But there are 7 other webinar modules that take you through in much more detail some of the other steps you can go through to actually get value into your organization. So I'll take you through these in order, and then I'll describe how you can purchase them at the end. There's a huge discount if you purchase them all as a bundle, because that makes the most sense for everyone. Otherwise, you don't get the overall value of seeing all of the marginal gains you can get. And the webinar is also available as a video stream after the initial live broadcast. So if you purchase access but you can't make one of the Wednesdays, you can get all of the templates and the video stream afterwards to actually do the training whenever suits you. So Module 2, identifying the challenge. This is what I was talking about as far as the 10 types of innovation. Now, all of the module slides you see here, they're just one of the examples of one of the slides within the overall module that each lasts an hour as well. So, identifying the challenge, this is all about figuring out what the actual challenge is and what the customer wants. How do you figure out what the customer actually finds valuable? So this slide is an example of what we talk about for the 10 different types of innovation. Most people think of innovation as just improving your product performance, but in fact there's 10 different types. They go through profit model, the network of companies that you interact with, your suppliers, etc., your company structure, there's innovations you can do there, what processes you have internally, so innovations within your operations, which are about reducing costs rather than just new product offerings. Product performance is what most people would consider normal product innovation, but product system is another one whereby you can improve interaction between different products and services to make the bundle more appealing to your customer. The experience around service that your customer receives also has scope for innovation, as does the channels within which you sell, the brand you portray, and what customers think of your customer experience. So what we found with the research from the consultancy is the more of these different types of innovation your company does, the more successful you are, as we showed in the graph earlier on. The top innovators on average out of those 10 focus on more than 3.5 different types of innovation, whereas an average company works on less than 2. In fact, 0 is the number of innovations that 12% of companies work on. They assume that their product and service is perfect, so they don't need to invest in it at all, whereas 72% focus on either only 1 or 2 innovations. Module 3 is about enhancing your personal creativity. This is everything that I discussed about understanding how you generate ideas and improving your and your team's ability to generate a diverse range of different ideas. So the slide here is one of the other neuroscience pieces that I talked about. It's about understanding how the mind forms ideas. So previously I talked about convergent and divergent ideas being in different parts of the brain. I also mentioned that divergent ideas are more relaxed, more associated with a relaxed state. So this is a neuroscience study that actually mapped out the different brain states and how different ideas are developed. Divergent ideas happen between the alpha and theta states. This is where the brain's very relaxed, whereas convergent ideas happen around the beta state, which is when you're much more alert. So what you can learn here is if you need to come up with wild ideas that are very different from anything you've thought of before, it helps to consider the problem in quite a lot of detail, but then go away and change your mental state into a more relaxed state. This is why lots of people think they come up with their best ideas in the shower or early in the morning or while exercising, because the brain actually changes the way it's working. It enables you to put yourself in a different brain state to become more creative. It's also about how to break through creative barriers. So learning from some of the most creative people in the past, of the present art scene in London, some of the biggest business innovators, you can learn a lot from how they get through their creative barriers to improve your ability to come up with innovative new solutions. Module 4 is about setting up a high-performance team, and this is what I mentioned earlier. If you want to have innovations, you need a diverse team. If you just fill it with lots of creative people or lots of delivery-focused people, you're more than likely not going to get a good result out at the end. So while you need some people who are very good at coming up with ideas, you need other people who are thinking, okay, how can we take this and experiment on it and turn it into a solution and get feedback from it? And then finally, other people who are better at thinking, okay, we've got this solution, what do we need to do in order to make it part of the business, to make it profitable, all of those things. And diversity doesn't just consider what people's mental states are like, as far as are their skills more around generating ideas or delivering ideas. It's about the actual makeup of the team. You need diversity in there. You need age, you need gender, you need backgrounds, you need qualifications, you need different perspectives. But what else? The other things we talk about here are things that many people haven't necessarily considered, like the difference between introverts and extroverts, and the physical office layout that you need to come up with different types of ideas. Essentially, this module is all about everything you can do to set up a really high-performance team who are not only going to take ideas, but they're going to generate their own ideas, they're going to experiment on them, and they're going to turn them into something tangible. Module 5 is about how you generate, critique, and evaluate ideas. And this is essentially around what's the best way to generate ideas and turn them into something valuable. It's what we like to call effective brainstorming. And it's all of the tips around not just getting ideas out there, but taking those ideas and figuring out which ones are most likely to be valuable to your end customers. So it's about how you brainstorm effectively. Most research has shown that brainstorming using the traditional shout out the ideas that you have method is actually incredibly bad at delivering actions at the end which are valuable. It's much more effective if you actually get people to write down ideas in silence beforehand. And then bring the ideas together and then discuss them, and more importantly then also critique them, critiquing each other's ideas but not critiquing the person who made them. So this is about all of the tips and techniques that we can give teams into how you actually take ideas, figure out which ones are the best, evaluate them for what the business needs are, and then figuring out which ones to take forward and refine, and therefore which ones are going to be most valuable in the end. Module 6 is about refining, experimenting, testing, and implementing. So again, this is as part of the innovation lifecycle. This is the whole loop around figuring out how to take a solution but actually turning it into something really valuable for the end customer. This slide is an example of how you experiment and get feedback externally on a product within an organization. And this is an example of what we'd suggest, which is creating a sandbox environment where a team can essentially get feedback on a potential solution in its unfinished state, without being disturbed by the internal governing processes within a current company, but also not rocking the boat of the other parts of the business as well. This has been shown to be a very effective way of trying things out with potential customers, with suppliers, without it being hindered by bureaucracy within the company. So it's about essentially taking the final solution and turning it into what is most valuable to the customer. Module 7 is about developing a culture of ongoing innovation. This, to a degree, focuses very much on the organizational support dimension and all of the capabilities within that. So how do you allocate budget to innovation? How do you get ideas from across the company? How do you measure your success? How do you measure individual people's success? How do you involve outside parties in your innovation process? And all of these things, there's best practice examples and methodologies about what you can do to actually get the benefit out of it. One of the examples here is around program budget. So how do you allocate your budget? And one of the things we recommend is figuring out which projects deliver incremental benefits, which ones deliver extensions to your current business model, and which ones are more breakthrough and long-term. And a 10%, 20%, 70% split in budget is a good sort of starting point for allocating your budget, so that not only do you keep producing new products regularly, but you also have investment in big potential long-term winners. And then finally, Module 8. This is the assessment and the open discussion. So we'll have been talking about a lot of content as far as improving your own innovation capability goes. But this session is around an assessment of what you've learned so far, so that we can give you a certification in the Improvides Innovation Training Level 1. That's something you can then take and show within your company to say, okay, we've got this new methodology, we've got this new expertise, let's give it a try out in certain areas and see what benefits we get out of it. Throughout the process, you'll also be producing action plans about how you get the benefit from your own companies, and we'll be reviewing those. But one thing you might get the most value out of is a extended live discussion from the participants. So what your innovation challenges are, what questions you have on improving your innovation capability, and discussions on the successes of the improvised methodology from what you found from the previous 8 weeks. So this is very much essentially a live consultancy that you're going to get a lot of benefit out of. Everything else that's included, we're not just doing video online. There's the ability to interact live during the webinars and pose questions relevant to your own business with the live answers like we'll do in a moment. You'll get all of the templates described during the webinars for download and immediate use. So these are going to be Office templates that you can print out and start using with your teams immediately to actually start getting the benefit out of it. The detailed methodology to use the Improvides Innovation Lifecycle. This is exclusive. This is something we've developed ourselves, and it's something that is going to help you really structure your innovation efforts. A list of actions which you can implement directly after each module. So essentially action plans and challenges we set to you, saying go out and do this week. This is going to help you on your path towards innovation. You get access to the streamings of the webinars for 6 months afterwards, so that you can go and revisit them and get the benefit over not only the next few weeks but the next few months. You also get a discount on Improvised consulting and coaching services. So while we can go through a lot of content to a large number of participants here online, you may find it's more beneficial that you see something and think that's really applicable to my company. Why doesn't Nick come and talk to us about it and see how we actually accelerate that? And then finally, there's a free high-level innovation capability assessment for your own business that I'll do to essentially help you see, this is where we might be best in practice already. This is where we might need to improve our capability. The only caveat around that is if it's outside London, then there will be travel and expenses applicable. So what can you do to purchase the webinar series? Well, there's 2 prices, one if you're a non-member of the website and one if you're an Improvides Pro member. If you're a non-member, then each of the modules either costs $199 US, or if you buy them as a bundle, there's a big discount, you get them all for $1,250. But if you're a pro member, then there is a monthly cost associated with being a member that gets you additional benefits. But you get a 50% discount on each unit of the module price. So instead of $199, you get $99.99 being the price. And overall, for the 8 modules, it costs only $499. That's a saving of $750. You can pay by PayPal, either using your credit card or bank transfer, by going to the address http://bit.ly/innovation webinar. Or you can just go to the webinars tab on improvides.com and purchase it that way. So you might be asking yourself, why am I giving a discount for the pro members? Well, that's because the bulk of my business is in coaching and consulting. I can do webinars like this to a mass audience and help a lot of people, but the main work that I enjoy doing is actually face-to-face with people and really helping them implement what I'm advising. So I enjoy creating these long-term relationships with people by interacting with them through the membership program. And I think for myself, that drives more value than just charging more for each time I host a webinar series. So there we go. That is the first module in the webinar series. I hope that's given you an insight into the sort of things you can do to improve your innovation capability. I now open up the floor to anyone who'd like to ask any questions about what they've heard so far, or give any insight into challenges they're facing at their own organization, and I'll try and provide some insights into it. So using the chat window, by all means, send us through a question. All right, okay, so Tony asked the question, what if the problem isn't the idea generation, but acceptance from upper management that applies to these ideas? It's a very, very important topic of discussion, and that relates back to the query of what innovation's part is in your organization, and what different people's what their own perceived roles are of innovation. So this is something that you might see differently in different cultures. Certain cultures have more of a hierarchy, and therefore there is more of a sort of distinction between rules and comments that come through from different levels. Some of them are more open, but it's often a corporate culture as well that has these hierarchies. So there are several ways that you can address this issue, and I talk in more detail about this during the webinar series as well. But let's go through a couple of them now. Just give me 1 second. I'll just take a sip of water. Okay. So the first part is that in order to accept an idea, the people at that level in leadership need to believe that the reason this idea is being generated is for the greater benefit of the company. And therefore there needs to be a very open admission of everyone's part in the innovation process. That goes very much for those people in upper management as well. So if that sort of desire of generating new ideas is lacking, then it's going to be a lot harder to come up with a reason for these people to accept the ideas. But there are certain things that you can do to address this. So, for example, you can involve them in not only the idea generation process, but very early on, one of the best ways to do it is to involve them in the setting of the evaluation criteria of the ideas. So if they are one of the main people who help set the evaluation criteria, saying, okay, does this idea in a very objective way meet the following criteria, whether it be around time frame, whether or not be about budget, whether or not it be about what new functionality or features or desirable offerings for your customers it brings out, then they're much more likely to be favorable in the actual evaluation process as well. So this is something that you can do. If you have a series of idea generation challenges, or you need to come up with a specific idea, then if they're involved in deciding what would be a successful idea, then they are much more likely to be open to listening about it. Other things that encourage that as well are, you can change the ways that you present the idea. So instead of having a formal approval process sort of sit-down presentation, Sometimes it is better to do it in a different way. So instead of presenting it via PowerPoint, to decorate the office with reams of paper that have been drawn by a sketch artist to invoke other senses. Sometimes you might want to sort of build the most basic prototype that you can and just get them to get this sort of idea in a more tangible way in their hands, and then then essentially challenge them to build on that idea. So not just reject the idea out hand. If they can involve themselves in the idea generation and idea refinement process, it's going to be much more likely that they're going to be positive about that. So this is why when I was talking about the people's creativity aspect of the 3 dimensions of innovation, one of them is called yes and collaboration. It's based on an improvisation technique whereby people take an idea and they add to it and they build to it, and you can involve everyone in that process. So if there's someone specific in upper management who has a personality trait of generally thinking they need to either play devil's advocate or rejecting ideas, if you can involve them in the sort of mindset that they're adding to the idea, then they're much more likely to view that process positively. There's many other ways that you can do that, but it might be better to discuss that more one-on-one, Tony. Does that, just give me a message, does that sort of address the sort of things you were referring to? Yeah, the prototype ideas is a very powerful one, because the more senses and the more visual senses that you can get people involved with personally, the more it becomes sort of part of their thought process as well. And being able to touch things is a huge, being able to touch and rotate things in their hand, it makes it more likely that their brain is thinking how they would use that product themselves. So yeah, I think one idea of sort of creating a little prototype, even if it's made out of clay or some of the most successful prototyping and sort of experimentation ideas are when you just take Play-Doh and some pencils and you just literally, and some duct tape, and you just stick things together into the basic shape of thinking, I mean, how would this be used? So yeah, it's one way of doing things. Any other sort of things on people's minds? Anything that you'd like a bit more insight on? Okay, right. Well, as I said, I mean, if you like what you've heard today, then I would first of all, the video is going to be on the webinar Module 1 website after this, so I'd suggest you forward it through to all of your friends if you think they'd be, and colleagues if you think they'd be interested. But secondly, I would strongly consider right now going to the website and purchasing the series. It's a very small outlay for essentially 8 weeks worth of training in best practice innovation. And by the end of it, you're going to have more of an insight than any of your colleagues in what sort of things are actually going to be of benefit to your own teams. So as I said again, http://bit.ly/innovation webinar. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you all again and helping you on your innovation process.